My grandmother has been dead for 6 months, and every night, at exactly 6 o'clock, someone still sets her table. 4 plates, sweet tea poured into her good glasses, the ones with the little chip in the rim that she never once let anybody throw away, a chair pulled out from the table, just far enough for someone to sit down. I want to tell you this story the way it actually happened, in the order it happened, because I think by the end, you'll understand why none of us have been able to make it stop, and why, on some nights, standing in that kitchen doorway, I'm not sure any of us actually wanted to. This is Red State Horror. Every Thursday I bring you a story from somewhere in the South, the kind that gets told quietly, at the kitchen table, after the kids have gone to bed. Before we start, do one thing for me. Turn your phone face down. Let the room get a little darker than it already is. This one deserves your full attention. My grandmother's name was Etta Mae Sutton, and for 61 years she lived in the same white farmhouse outside Beaufort, South Carolina, where the backyard ran right up to a slow brown tidal creek we all just called the water. There was a screened porch with a ceiling fan that clicked on every third rotation, a kitchen that always smelled like flour and bacon grease, and a dock out back with 2 boards missing that nobody ever got around to fixing because Grandma Etta said a house needed at least one flaw, or it wasn't a home, it was a museum. She raised 4 children in that house and buried a husband out of it. My grandfather, Wendell, was a shrimper. For 40 years, he ran his boat out before sunrise and came back up that creek at 6 o'clock in the evening, sharp as a church bell, and for 40 years, Grandma Etta set the table at 10 till 6 every single day, so it would be ready the second his boots hit the porch steps. Wendell died when I was 9. Heart, in his sleep, is as easy as falling asleep in a chair. And here's the thing about my grandmother that you need to understand before anything else in this story makes sense. She never stopped setting his place. 15 years ago, she set a plate for a man who wasn't coming home. My mother used to gently suggest maybe it was time to stop, and Grandma Etta would just smile that soft, closed-mouth smile of hers and say, "Waiting's not the same as hoping, baby. I'm not waiting on him anymore. I just don't like the table looking empty." We all thought that was one of those sweet, sad old woman things. A habit worn so deep into a life that it outlives the reason for it. We did not know then that we were watching a rule get written. We just thought it was love, and grew a little strange with time. Grandma Etta passed in January, in her sleep, in the same bed she'd shared with Wendell for 31 years. 92 years old. It was, by every measure, a good death, peaceful, full life. The kind of death you're supposed to be grateful for, if you can stand to be grateful for something like that at all. First night, the table was set. The family stayed at the farmhouse for 2 weeks after the funeral, sorting through 61 years of a life, deciding what got kept and what got given away and what got quietly thrown out when nobody was looking, because some things are too heavy to pass down. My mother and her 2 sisters split the night staying over so the house wouldn't sit empty. I was 26 then, and I offered to take a few nights myself, mostly because I wanted a little time alone in that house before it stopped being ours. The first night I stayed there by myself was a Tuesday, 9 days after the funeral. I'd been in the back bedroom going through a box of photographs, and I lost track of time the way you do when you're looking at pictures of people who are gone. When I finally checked my phone, it was 6:15, and I realized I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. I walked out to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich, and the table was set. 4 plates. Her good glasses, the sweet tea poured up to the same line in every glass, like somebody had measured it. A chair pulled out. My first thought, and I want you to understand this was a genuine thought, not a story I told myself later to make it make sense. My first thought was that one of my aunts must have driven over. That's how ordinary it looked. That's how much it looked like something a person had just done. 5 minutes before I walked in, I called my mother. She hadn't been to the house all day. I called my Aunt Denise, who lived 40 minutes away and hadn't left her house since lunch. I called my Aunt Renee, who was out of state visiting her son. Nobody had been to the farmhouse. Nobody had set that table. I stood in that kitchen for a long time, looking at 4 plates nobody had touched, and a chair pulled out for nobody. And I did the thing you do when you can't explain something. I decided not to think about it too hard. I put the plates back in the cabinet. I poured the tea down the sink. I told myself somebody's memory of the schedule must have gotten confused. Or maybe I'd forgotten I'd set it out myself that morning, distracted, on autopilot, the way grief makes you do things you don't remember doing. I did not sleep well that night, but I told myself it was nothing. I told my mother about it 2 days later, mostly as a joke, the way you tell a story on yourself. "I think grief's getting to me," I said. I set the table without even realizing it. She laughed, and then she got quiet. And then she told me it had happened to her too, the week before, and she'd assumed the exact same thing about herself. We didn't talk about it as anything more than that for a while. Grief does strange things to people, and everybody in that family was grieving, and it felt easier, safer honestly, to believe we were all just a little unraveled, going through the motions of a life that had run on a schedule for 61 years and hadn't figured out yet how to stop. But it kept happening. Every night, 6 o'clock, 4 plates, sweet tea, a chair pulled out. Sometimes it was my aunt who found it. Sometimes it was me. Twice, my mother found it on nights when she swore up and down she hadn't been near the kitchen since morning. My Uncle Ray, who's about as sentimental as a fence post, decided he'd had enough of what he called everybody spooking themselves. He set up a little battery-powered camera on top of the refrigerator, angled down at the table, mostly to prove a point. He was certain one of us was doing it, and either forgetting or not admitting it. He said it with real confidence. He said it like a man closing a case. The footage from that first week showed exactly what you'd expect. An empty kitchen at 5:55, an empty kitchen at 5:58, and then, at 6:01, when whoever was in the house that night walked in to check, the table was set. Not one frame of footage showed a hand touching a plate. Not one frame showed a chair moving. The camera simply skipped, in the space of 2 or 3 minutes, from an empty table to a full one, without ever capturing the moment in between. My Uncle Ray stopped talking about everybody spooking themselves after that. He didn't say much of anything, actually. He just started making sure he wasn't the one staying at the house alone. I want to pause here for just a second because I know some of you have been with this channel since the very first story, back when it was just me and a microphone and way too many tabs open trying to figure out how any of this worked. If you're new, welcome. Genuinely, I'm glad you found your way to this one. And if you've been here a while, thank you for sticking around. Every comment, every share, every person who tells a friend to listen to one of these, that's the only reason this channel keeps growing. So if this story's got its hooks in you already, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next Thursday, and if you want, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from tonight. Now, back to that farmhouse. Here's where it stopped being something we could explain away as one of us sleepwalking through grief. 6 weeks after the funeral, the whole family went out of town together for my cousin's wedding. 3 days. The farmhouse was locked, alarms set, nobody anywhere near it. My Uncle Ray checked the security footage from his phone as a kind of running joke among the family group chat. Let's see if Grandma sets herself a plate with nobody home. At 6 o'clock on the second night, the table was set. 4 plates, sweet tea in the good glasses. A chair pulled out. The camera caught the same nothing it always caught. An empty kitchen, and then, without a visible transition, a full one. Nobody joked about it after that. Around that same time, I ran into a neighbor, Miss Odell, who'd lived 2 properties down from my grandparents for almost 50 years. I mentioned, carefully, that the family had been having some strange nights at the house. Not explaining much, just testing the water to see if she'd think I was losing my mind. She didn't. She nodded, slow, like she'd been waiting for someone to bring it up. Etta used to set that table for Wendell every evening at 6, right up until the day she died, Miss Odell said. 15 years after that man passed, and she never once forgot. I used to see the porch light come on right at 6, clear as anything, even after Wendell was long gone. I asked her about it once. She told me, Odell, some habits aren't really habits. They're promises. And a promise doesn't know when to stop, just because the reason for it did. I didn't know what to do with that, standing in her driveway with the sun going down. I still don't, if I'm honest with you. I decided I needed to see it happen, not find it after the fact. See it, start to finish, with my own eyes. I told my mother I'd stay at the farmhouse alone that Thursday. She didn't love the idea, but she didn't stop me either. I think, by then, some part of her wanted to know too, and some part of her was afraid of knowing. I got there around 4 in the afternoon, while there was still good light coming off the water. I made myself useful for a while, sat on the back porch and watched the tide pull out, watched a heron pick its way along the mudflat like it had somewhere important to be. The house was quiet in that particular way. An old house gets quiet. Not empty exactly, just settled, like it was holding still on purpose. By 5:30, I was in the kitchen, sitting at the counter where I could see the whole table without being at it. I'd turned off every light except the one over the stove, because I wanted to see whatever there was to see clearly, without my own eyes playing tricks in the dark. 5:40, nothing. The clock on the stove clicked over, digit by digit, and I watched it the way you watch a pot you've been told not to watch. 5:50. The ceiling fan on the porch clicked on its 3rd rotation, same as it always had, even though nobody had turned it on. I told myself it was the wind. 5:55. The house got quiet in a new way. I don't have a better word for it than that. The regular sounds of an old house, settling, creaking, the refrigerator humming, all of it just seemed to fall back, the way a room goes quiet when someone important walks in. At 5:58, I smelled biscuits, not faintly, clearly, warmly, the exact smell of my grandmother's kitchen on a Sunday morning, thick in the air like the oven had just been opened. The oven, I want to be clear, was off, had been off all day. I checked it myself, twice, before I sat down. At 5:59, the chair at the head of the table, Wendell's old seat, the one nobody in the family ever sat in, not once, not even by accident, pulled itself back from the table. Slow, even. The way you'd pull a chair back for someone you were seating, not the way a chair moves on its own. And at 6 o'clock exactly, the plates were there. All 4 of them. Warm looking under the stove light. Sweet tea sweating in the good glasses like it had just been poured from a cold pitcher. I did not see a hand. I did not see a shape. I want to be honest with you about that, because I could tell you I saw something and it would make for a better story, and I won't do that to you. What I saw was absence turning into presence, in the space of about 90 seconds, in a kitchen where I was the only living person for half a mile in any direction. But I'll tell you what I felt, because I can't explain it away and I've stopped trying to. I felt exactly the way I used to feel walking into that kitchen as a kid, right at supper time, when my grandmother would look up from the stove and say, "There you are. Sit down, you're just in time." Not frightened, not cold, just expected, like I'd walked into a room where I was wanted. I sat there for almost 20 minutes, not moving, watching 4 plates that nobody was going to eat off of. And then, right at the edge of where the stove light gave out into shadow, I thought I saw it. Just for a second, just at the corner of my eye where things are always less certain than you'd like them to be. 2 shapes at the table. Not clear, not solid. More like the suggestion of 2 people sitting close together the way you sit with someone you've shared a table with 10,000 times, comfortable in a silence that doesn't need filling. I blinked, and it was gone. The kitchen was just a kitchen again. 4 plates, 2 of them clearly empty of anyone, sweet tea slowly losing its cold. I didn't feel like I'd seen a ghost. I felt like I'd walked in on something private, something that had been going on, quietly, at 6 o'clock every evening, for 15 years before I was ever born to it, and would probably keep going on long after I stopped watching. We had a family meeting about the house not long after that. Selling it was on the table, plainly, practically. None of us lived close enough to keep it up properly, and a house that size needs people in it to make sense of the upkeep. Nobody could bring themselves to list it. Not one of us. We didn't talk about why, exactly, not directly, but I think we all understood the same thing without saying it out loud. Whatever was happening at 6 o'clock in that kitchen wasn't asking us for anything. It wasn't reaching for us, or warning us, or hungry for our attention the way the stories usually go. It was just continuing. A door that had been left open for 40 years, staying open, because nobody inside it had ever learned how to close it, not even death. My Aunt Denise lives there now. She told me she still sets the table herself most nights, right alongside whatever else is setting it, because it felt wrong somehow to let just one of them do all the work. She says most evenings by 6:15, there's nothing left to explain. Just a table, set for 4, in a kitchen that's finally, quietly, exactly the way it's supposed to be. I go back for Sunday dinners when I can. I sit in my usual chair. I do not sit in Wendell's. And every single time, at 6 o'clock, I watch that empty chair pull itself back, just far enough for someone to sit down. And every single time, some part of me, the part that isn't scared, the part that maybe should be, is glad the table's set. I still don't know if that's a haunting, or a promise that just never learned how to end. Maybe you don't have to pick one. If you made it all the way to the end of this one, drop table in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know you were here for this. If this story found you at the right moment, on the right night, do me a favor and subscribe, so you don't miss next Thursdays. We're headed to a locked apple cellar in the Shenandoah Valley, and something in it has been knocking every harvest morning for longer than anyone still living can explain. This is Red State Horror. I'll see you next Thursday. Listen in the dark.